What would you do if the people closest to you, the ones you loved and trusted most, turned on you, trying to strip away your dignity, your fortune, and your very essence? This is a story of betrayal, emotional warfare, and the unexpected strength of a woman pushed to her breaking point. Join me as I take you through a journey of pain, revenge, and ultimately, redemption. Don't forget to comment where you're watching from. Let's dive in. I've spent the last few years of my life watching everything slip through my fingers. I'm 72 now, and I'm no stranger to the weight of loneliness. When I look in the mirror, I don't see the vibrant woman I once was, full of dreams and hopes for the future. No, instead, I see a tired woman. A woman shaped by the harshness of betrayal, by the endless stream of mistakes, regrets, and sacrifices that seem to follow me like a shadow. I live alone now, in a large, isolated mansion that no longer brings me joy. My ex-husband, John, and I built this house together. We were married for nearly 30 years, but the love we once had faded long ago, replaced by tension, accusations, and silence. He left when Samantha, my daughter, was still in her teens. She was angry with me back then, angry that I tried to protect her from that boy, the one who was so wrong for her. I didn't know it at the time, but he wasn't just trouble. He was the one thing that would shatter my relationship with her forever. Samantha went to live with her father after we divorced. She didn't want to be under my roof, not with all my rules and restrictions. She thought I was controlling, always telling her what to do, always trying to guide her in the right direction. That was the last time she truly needed me, and after that, she pulled away. She turned to John, who, I suppose, gave her everything she wanted, and I was left here, alone. I never thought she'd come back, ever. After all these years, I figured she was doing just fine with her father, living her life, getting into trouble on her own, far from my reach. But, as life often does, it threw me a curveball when Samantha came knocking on my door, at the age of 33, with no job, no prospects, and no place to stay. She wanted to move back in, and I foolishly allowed it. She was different now, but the same in many ways. The girl I raised, the one who used to need me, had grown into someone I hardly recognized. She was careless, irresponsible, and completely dependent on me. Her presence, once comforting, now grating, was a reminder of my failures as a mother. And so I did what any mother would do. I tried to help. I let her borrow my car, my prized possession, hoping it might give her a sense of independence, some semblance of responsibility. I never expected what came next. It happened on a Friday night, just a week after I let her take the car. Samantha came home late, the car scraped up and dented. She was fine, but the vehicle was damaged. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said, but her tone was flat, not a hint of regret in her voice. I asked her what happened, but she barely looked at me as she walked past, heading upstairs without offering much of an explanation. I tried to stay calm. I really did. But when I went outside to inspect the damage, I felt my blood boil. I had worked my whole life for that car. Everything I had, every penny I earned, went into ensuring that I had a life of comfort and luxury. And there she was, treating it like it was nothing. I called after her, my voice shaking with frustration. "What the hell happened to the car, Samantha?" She stopped, turned around, and for the first time in a long while, looked me dead in the eye. "It's just a car, Mom. It's not like I wrecked my life." My heart dropped. "A car? You can't even take care of the simplest things. And you still don't get it. You're not a kid anymore, Samantha. It's time to grow up." She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. "You're too controlling, you know that? I'm not a little girl anymore. Maybe you're the one who needs to change. Maybe you're the one who's getting old, who's losing it. Maybe you're the one who needs help." And then she stormed off. It was in that moment, staring at the dented side of my car, that I realized just how much I had lost. Not just the car, but my daughter. She didn't respect me anymore. She didn't care about me. And for what? Because I tried to protect her? Because I loved her too much? It felt like all of my years of sacrifice, of trying to keep her from falling into the same traps I had been in vain. I don't know what came over me after that conversation. I had put up with too much. For years, I let her get away with everything. She had manipulated me, guilt-tripped me, made me feel like I was the problem. But that was it. I wasn't going to be her doormat anymore. Not for her, not for anyone. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of it all crushed me. I wasn't just angry. I was humiliated, heartbroken, and absolutely done. I had spent my whole life trying to make everyone around me happy, trying to fix everything that went wrong. But at what cost? Where was the respect for me? Where was the love? The next morning, I woke up with a new sense of clarity. A plan started to form in my mind, and I realized that the only way to regain control of my life, my happiness, was to make a bold move. A move that would not only shock Samantha, but also show her just how far I was willing to go to protect what was left of me. I knew what I had to do next. I didn't know how it would play out, but I was done playing the victim. It was time to take back control. The day after Samantha wrecked my car, I made a decision that changed everything. I had been trying to convince myself for years that maybe, just maybe, she would grow up, that things would get better. But I realized, in that quiet moment, as I stared out the window, that if I didn't take control of the situation now, I might lose myself entirely. I was tired of being treated like I was disposable, like I was the one who was always in the wrong. Samantha came downstairs later that morning, eyes still heavy from the night before, but she barely acknowledged me. Her usual nonchalance was in full effect. She was so used to getting away with everything. I couldn't stand it anymore. "Do you even care about this house?" I asked, my voice steely, my patience wearing thin. She turned to me, expression blank. "I care about getting a roof over my head," she muttered, grabbing a cup of coffee from the counter. "And what else? You come here, you wreck my car, and you don't even bat an eye. Do you understand how much that hurts, Samantha?" She paused, her eyes flickering with something between annoyance and guilt. But guilt didn't last long with Samantha. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please. You always do this. You act like everything's so important. It's just a car. It's just a little damage. Why are you so dramatic?" I felt a sharp pain in my chest. There it was again. She saw me as weak, as over-emotional, as someone she could push around. My anger rose, but I had to stay calm, had to stay focused. I couldn't let her turn the tables on me again. "Do you think that's all it is, Samantha?" I stood up, my voice steady but firm. "I work for everything I have. Everything in this house is here because I made it happen. And you come in here like you own the place, like I'm your personal ATM. I can't do this anymore. I'm done being your doormat." She looked at me, lips curling into a smirk. "So what? You're kicking me out? You're going to send me back to Dad? Do it then. I don't care." I shook my head, my heart aching at the coldness in her words. "No, Samantha. I'm giving you an ultimatum. You're staying here, and you're going to find a job. You're going to start taking responsibility for yourself. You're going to stop using me as your safety net." Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment there was a flicker of surprise, maybe even fear. But then she crossed her arms, squaring her shoulders like she was ready for a fight. "And what if I don't? What will you do then, huh? You gonna put me out on the street?" I could feel the walls closing in around me, but I pushed through it. "If you don't get a job, Samantha, I'm selling this house. I'm moving to somewhere smaller, and I'll give you 1 month to figure it out, or you'll have to leave. I'm done supporting you like this. I've had enough." She stared at me, her lips pressed together in a thin line. I could see her mind working, processing my words. I wasn't sure if she believed me, or if she thought it was some empty threat, but I meant it. For the first time in a long time, I meant it. "You can't be serious," she said, shaking her head. "You're just saying that to control me, to make me feel small, but you're not going to do it. You love this house too much. You'll never sell it." "You're wrong," I said, my voice unwavering. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. I can't keep living like this, pretending that everything's fine when it's not." For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing my ground. I had no idea what would happen next, but I knew I couldn't keep letting her treat me like I was invisible, like I didn't matter. Samantha stood there silent for a moment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. I didn't know if she was angry, confused, or just indifferent, but I didn't care. I had said what needed to be said. Later that day, I made the call. I contacted a real estate agent and started the process of selling the house. The decision felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders, but also like a door slamming shut. I wasn't sure what I would do next. The house had been my home for so many years, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized how suffocating it had become. This house was full of memories, memories of a life that no longer fit the woman I was becoming. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. The years of marriage, the long hours I spent working, the endless attempts to fix things that were broken. But nothing ever felt right. My daughter had become someone I didn't recognize. She was selfish, entitled, and didn't seem to care about anything beyond her own comfort. I couldn't let her keep walking all over me. I couldn't keep letting her destroy everything I'd worked for. But what hurt the most was that she didn't even see it. She didn't see me, didn't care about what I had sacrificed. And yet, she still expected me to give everything to her. I felt a fire building inside me, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. It was time to take control of my life again. I didn't know what was coming next, but I was done being passive. I wasn't going to let her or anyone else walk all over me anymore. As I closed my eyes, I realized something. This wasn't just about the house. It was about me reclaiming my power. And whatever came next, I was ready for it. But I had no idea that the storm was only just beginning. The days following my ultimatum felt like an avalanche, everything rushing downhill and threatening to crush me. Samantha barely spoke to me, retreating into her room as if I had never said a word. I knew she was angry, but she was always angry. That was her thing. She never liked being told what to do, never liked being held accountable. And yet, here I was, trying to do the one thing that could help her, force her to stand on her own 2 feet. It wasn't easy for me either. I had spent my entire life catering to the needs of others. John, Samantha, even my friends, who would call on me for advice or help, and I'd drop everything to be there. I was the one people relied on. But who relied on me? It was a bitter pill to swallow, realizing that I had never truly asked for anything in return. And now I was facing the consequences of that. Samantha's silence was a weapon, one she used with precision. She didn't need to say anything to make me feel like the villain. The way she avoided me, the way she refused to lift a finger around the house, it was a clear message. You don't matter, it seemed to say. But then, a week later, she made her move. John called me that evening, his voice gruff and tired, the tone instantly triggering a wave of frustration in my chest. We hadn't spoken much in recent years, aside from the occasional terse exchange over Samantha's well-being. I had always hoped that the separation between us was final, that he'd move on and leave me to do the same. But now he was on the line, and I could already hear the edge of concern in his voice. Marlene, we need to talk about Samantha, he said, his words deliberate. What about her? I replied, my patience already running thin. I've made my position clear, John. She's staying here under my roof, and she's going to get a job. I'm not a babysitter anymore. I know, but she's in a bad place, he said, his tone dropping into something more insistent. You're being hard on her. She's not the same person she used to be. She's struggling, Marlene. I think you need to reconsider your ultimatum. Struggling? I scoffed. She's 29 years old. She's not a child anymore. I've done everything I could for her, John. And look where we are now. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Marlene, you need to understand something. She's been saying some things about you. She's worried about you. She says you're losing it, that you're not thinking clearly anymore. And she wants to make sure you're okay. I felt my stomach churn. The familiar knot of anger twisted inside me. What the hell are you talking about? She thinks maybe you need professional help, he continued, his voice a little softer, but the words hitting like daggers. She's worried you're getting old. Marlene, you're not the woman you used to be. And maybe it's time for you to take a step back and get some help, for your own good. My hands shook as I gripped the phone tighter. I had heard this before, only it wasn't coming from her. This time, it was coming from him, the man who had left me, the man who had never understood my sacrifices, my struggles, the same man who had failed me in every way possible. You think I need help? I asked, my voice low and deadly quiet. After everything I've been through, everything I've done for that child, you think I need help? I'm just saying. Maybe it's time, John insisted. She's making plans to help you get the right care, Marlene. She just wants what's best for you. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, but I couldn't. I had to hold it together. I had to show him that I wasn't the frail, confused woman he thought I was, that I was still the woman who had built everything with my own hands. I'm fine, John. I don't need anyone's help, not yours, not Samantha's. I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions. But as I hung up the phone, my mind raced. They were plotting against me. Together. John and Samantha, working in tandem to strip me of my dignity, my freedom. They wanted to take control of my life. They thought I was old, weak, and foolish. They were wrong. And I knew that if I didn't act quickly, they would succeed. They'd force me into some facility, some place where I could be looked after, and my wealth would be theirs to manage. All of it. My hard-earned money, my future, my autonomy, gone. I couldn't let that happen. Not after everything I had endured. Not after everything I had fought for. The next day, Samantha confronted me. She stood in the kitchen, her arms folded, her expression that of someone who knew they had won. I could see the arrogance in her eyes, the belief that she was in control. She had probably imagined that I would back down, that I would apologize for my hardness, that I would go back to being the mother she could manipulate. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. I had changed, and she was about to learn that. I don't want to fight anymore. Mom, Samantha said, her voice soft and disarming. I just want you to see that I'm trying. I'm really trying. I want us to be okay. We've been through so much. I'm worried about you. I know what you're doing, I said, my voice steady. You're not trying to help me, Samantha. You're trying to control me, just like he is. Her face faltered for just a second, but she quickly regained composure. That's not true. I love you, Mom, but you're not yourself anymore. I'm just looking out for you. I laughed bitterly. Looking out for me? Or looking out for yourself? The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. For the first time in years, I saw the crack in her armor. She didn't know how to respond. She had thought I'd cave in, that I'd apologize for being too controlling, but I wasn't backing down. Not this time. I was done being her victim. Done being their pawn. The next few days passed in a haze. I kept my distance from Samantha. I knew what she was planning. She had already set her sights on what she wanted. My money, my house, my life. But what she didn't know was that I had already begun to take steps of my own. I started looking into my finances, everything I had worked for, and making plans. I wasn't going to let her or John take anything from me. But even as I did, I felt a sense of dread creeping up on me. What if it was already too late? What if they had already set everything in motion? The battle had just begun, and I had no idea where it would take me. But one thing was clear. They were about to learn just how far I was willing to go to protect everything I had. The days dragged on, and every moment felt heavier than the last. I couldn't escape the overwhelming feeling that I was being suffocated by Samantha, by John, by their manipulations. It was as if the walls were closing in on me, and the only way out was to fight my way through it. Samantha, despite her earlier attempts at feigning concern, kept her distance. It was almost as if she were waiting for me to crack, to beg her for forgiveness, to let her back into my life as if everything were normal. But nothing was normal. Not anymore. She had crossed a line, and now she was no longer my daughter. She was a stranger, someone who wanted to control my life, just as John had for all those years, and I wasn't going to let her. That night I sat in the quiet of the living room, the silence of the house pressing down on me. I thought about everything that had happened, the decisions I had made, the pain I had endured, and the realization that I could no longer remain passive. I had to take control back. I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let her use me any longer. I had to show her, show them both, that I could stand on my own, that I was still the woman who had built a life from nothing, who had worked tirelessly to create something meaningful. I wasn't going to let them take that from me. The phone call to the real estate agent was the first step. My hands trembled as I dialed the number, but I couldn't let the fear paralyze me. I had made the decision, and now it was time to follow through. I needed to sell this house, the house that had once been my home, that had been filled with the sounds of my daughter's laughter, the memories of a life that felt so distant now. But it wasn't just about the house. It was about my future. It was about me reclaiming the control I had lost. The agent confirmed that everything would be set in motion immediately. I felt a strange sense of relief, but at the same time, a deep ache in my chest. This house had been the one constant in my life for so many years, but I had to let it go. For my own peace of mind, for my own sense of self-worth. The next morning, I went to the bank. I withdrew a portion of my savings, the money I had accumulated over decades. It wasn't a small sum. It was enough to give me the freedom I needed to make decisions on my terms. I wasn't going to let John or Samantha control it, not anymore. As I left the bank, I felt a small flicker of empowerment, like I was finally taking control of something in my life. But as I drove back home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Samantha was home when I returned. She had been unusually quiet for the past few days, probably simmering over my decision. She was waiting for me in the kitchen, standing by the counter with a glass of water in hand. The moment I walked in, she spoke, her voice strained. "I know what you're doing," she said, her eyes narrowed. "You're selling the house? You think that's going to fix everything?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took a deep breath, my mind racing. It wasn't just about selling the house. It was about showing both of them, that I could still make my own decisions. I wasn't some fragile old woman they could walk all over. I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. "I am," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm going to do it because I need to. I need to get out of here, Samantha. I need a fresh start." She scoffed, setting her glass down on the counter with a loud thud. "A fresh start? What's that supposed to mean? You think running away from everything is going to solve your problems? You're just going to throw it all away just like that?" I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the anger I had been holding back for days threatening to spill over. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm taking control of my life, something you've never understood. You've always taken everything I've given you and never once thought about what I needed." Her face flushed, and I could see the tension in her body. For a moment, she seemed to hesitate, like she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. And then, in a burst of frustration, she finally spoke. "You're not the same anymore, Mom. You've changed, and not for the better." She paused, and I could see the tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I'm just trying to help you. Why can't you see that?" I shook my head, my heart heavy with disappointment. "I don't need your help, Samantha, not like this. You don't get to control my life anymore." Her face crumpled, and for a split second, I almost felt pity for her. She was lost, scared, and maybe even regretful. But I couldn't go back. Not now, not after everything. I had given her everything I had, and it was never enough. Now, it was time to think about myself for once. She stood there, silent, her eyes searching mine for something. Maybe an apology, maybe an excuse to make everything okay again. But I had nothing to give her. Not anymore. I had already given too much. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm doing what's best for me, and you're going to have to find your own way." With that, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there. As I moved through the house, I felt a strange sense of finality. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I stopped being her caretaker, her emotional punching bag, and started being the woman I was meant to be. But even as I felt a glimmer of victory, a knot twisted in my stomach. I knew what was coming next. Samantha wouldn't let me go that easily, and neither would John. They were going to fight me for control, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. I wasn't ready for what would happen next, but I had made my choice, and I would stand by it, no matter the cost. The days that followed my confrontation with Samantha were a whirlwind. I thought she would be angry. I thought she might lash out, but what I wasn't prepared for was the quiet war that would follow. She didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't even try to manipulate me like she had done in the past. Instead, she went silent. The kind of silence that felt colder than any argument could. I had made my move, and now I could feel the tension in the air. She was no longer the girl I once knew, the one who sought my advice, my approval, or my love. She was distant, calculating even, and I knew she was plotting her next step. She had always been like that, never showing her hand until it was too late. That morning, as I sat in the kitchen sipping my coffee, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something about the timing made my heart skip a beat. I almost didn't answer, but then I did. It was John, my ex-husband. "Marlene, we need to talk," he said, his voice carrying a mix of authority and concern. "I know things have been difficult between us, but this situation with Samantha, you're pushing her too hard. She's not in a good place right now. She's fragile, and you need to understand that." I clenched my jaw, trying to steady my breathing. I wasn't about to let him manipulate me again, not after everything he had done. "John, I'm not going to let you use her as a pawn in your game. I'm doing what's best for me, and maybe, just maybe, that's what she needs too. She's an adult. She's not a child anymore." There was a long silence on the other end. "You're not thinking clearly. Maybe you're not as capable as you think." I think it's time you consider getting some help, Marlene. I'm serious. I felt the blood rush to my head. I could hear Samantha's influence in his voice. They had been talking behind my back, conspiring together. I had known it, but hearing it confirmed hit harder than I expected. Help? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, seething with anger. You're really going to suggest that I need help, John? You're the one who walked out on me. You're the one who left me to pick up the pieces of our broken marriage and raise our daughter alone. And now, you think you can just swoop in and decide what's best for me? Marlene, please. I'm just trying to look out for you. You're getting older. I don't want to see you fall apart. I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me. He wasn't concerned for me. He was concerned for himself, for the money, the power, the control. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about keeping me weak, keeping me in line so they could take what they wanted. I wasn't going to fall for it. No, John, I'm not falling for this, not again. You and Samantha have been plotting behind my back, trying to take my life away from me. You think I don't see it? There was another long pause. I could almost feel the distance growing between us, like something was breaking in that moment. I'm sorry you feel that way, Marlene, he said softly, but his words carried an edge. But I won't let you destroy yourself. Destroy myself? I echoed, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sorrow. You're the one who destroyed this family. You're the one who broke everything apart. I'm not the one who needs help. You are, and if you want to help me, you'll stay out of my way. I hung up the phone before he could say another word, my heart pounding in my chest. My hands were shaking. I had never been so angry, so hurt. But something else had shifted in me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't going to let them push me around. Not this time. Samantha didn't talk to me for the rest of the day. I could tell she was planning something. She had that look in her eyes, the same one she'd had when she was a teenager, the one she used when she thought she could manipulate me into doing what she wanted. But I wasn't going to be manipulated. Not anymore. By the time evening came, I received a letter from John's lawyer. I opened it with shaking hands, my heart sinking as I read the words. The letter was a formal request to have me evaluated by a psychiatrist. It wasn't just about Samantha's concern for me anymore. It was a legal move. They were trying to take control of my life, my finances, my future. It was the first real shot fired in this battle. I read the letter several times, each time growing more enraged. They were taking it a step further. They didn't care about me. They didn't care about my well-being. They cared about power. They cared about the money. My money. The idea of them being in control of my life, my decisions, made my blood run cold. I wasn't going to let this happen. I couldn't. But what could I do? How could I fight back? I paced the living room, my mind racing. They were trying to break me down, trying to make me believe I was losing my mind, trying to make me doubt myself. But I knew who I was. I knew what I was capable of, and I wasn't going to let them steal that from me. I had to fight back. But this time, I wouldn't do it with anger. I would do it with precision. I would outsmart them. It wasn't just about the house, the money, or the power anymore. It was about my dignity, my sanity, my life, and I wasn't going to let them take it. I started making plans. I called my lawyer the next morning, setting everything into motion. I would fight this in court. I would fight for my right to control my own life. I didn't care how long it took. I didn't care what I had to do. I was done being the victim, and I was going to make them regret ever thinking they could control me. The battle had officially begun. Samantha and John had made their move, and now I had to outmaneuver them. I wasn't going to lie down and let them strip me of everything I had built, my life, my dignity, my independence. They wanted to control me, manipulate me into submission, but I wasn't about to give them that satisfaction. It started with the letter, their legal request to have me evaluated, to make it official that I was unfit to make decisions for myself, felt like a punch to the gut. But as the days passed, I grew more focused, more determined. The fear they tried to instill in me began to burn away, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. I wasn't just fighting for my house, my money. I was fighting for my life, for the years of hard work and sacrifices I had made to get to where I was. I hired a lawyer, someone I knew I could trust, a woman named Linda, who had come highly recommended by a friend of mine. The moment I walked into her office, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Linda was sharp, confident, and understanding, qualities I hadn't realized I needed until that moment. We're going to fight this. Marlene, Linda said, after I explained the situation, I'll handle the legal side, but we need to prepare. We need to build a case that shows you're in full control of your mental faculties. We'll need witnesses, evidence of your capacity to manage your own life. It was strange to hear her say it so matter-of-factly. I'd spent so many years doubting myself, so many years feeling like maybe I was losing touch with reality. But Linda made it clear. I was in control, and if anyone was trying to take that from me, we would fight them with everything we had. The first few weeks were agonizing. I had to gather everything: financial records, emails, statements from friends who could vouch for my state of mind, for my ability to make decisions. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, and I felt a constant weight on my shoulders. Every conversation with Linda, every meeting with the lawyer, felt like another step deeper into the rabbit hole of their manipulations. Samantha didn't make an appearance at first. She knew what I was doing, what I had planned, but she stayed away, probably hoping I'd falter, that I'd reconsider. Maybe she thought I'd come to my senses, realizing how difficult I was making things. But what she didn't realize was that the more she stayed silent, the stronger I became. And then, just when I thought things were settling into a rhythm, John made his next move. It was a phone call, a late-night one, and the tone in his voice instantly put me on alert. There was no pleasantry, no concern for how I was doing. It was all business, cold, calculating. Marlene, I'm going to have to be blunt, he began. I've spoken to Samantha, and she's worried about you. She's concerned about the strain this is all putting on you. You've been acting erratically. We both agree that it might be best if we take this to court and let a judge decide what's in your best interest. I felt my hands tremble, but I didn't let my voice crack. You're not going to get away with this, John. You and Samantha can plot all you want, but I'm not going down without a fight. I'm in control of my life, and I'm not handing that over to you. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the sound of his breathing, but it wasn't the tired, resigned breath of a man who was ready to give up. It was the breath of someone who was already planning his next move, his next strike. You can keep fighting this, Marlene, he said, his voice cold. But in the end, you'll lose. Samantha will make sure of that. I slammed the phone down before he could say anything else. The nerve of him. How dare he think he could dictate the course of my life? I wasn't some old fool, some helpless woman who could be pushed around anymore. I had been silent for too long. I had let them make decisions for me, make me feel invisible. But that was over. I took a deep breath and looked at the papers scattered across the table in front of me. I had a plan, and it was all coming together. Every witness, every email, every shred of evidence pointed to one thing. I was in control of my faculties. I was more than capable of managing my own life. But I knew this wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about proving to everyone, especially myself, that I was still strong, that I could still stand up for myself, no matter how old I was. And I couldn't let Samantha and John win. The weeks passed in a blur of legal jargon, meetings with Linda, and sleepless nights where I thought about everything I had lost and everything I had left to fight for. But through it all, one thing kept me grounded. I wasn't alone. Linda was there, helping me piece everything together. I had friends who believed in me, who had been there when I needed them most. And as much as Samantha and John thought they could tear me apart, I was stronger than they realized. One evening, I received a call from Linda with an update on the case. The hearing was set for the following week. It was time for all of this to come to a head. The next few days were a whirlwind. I was nervous, of course. Who wouldn't be? But I had prepared for this. I knew my truth, and I was ready to stand up in that courtroom and tell it. When the day of the hearing finally arrived, I felt a strange sense of calm. As I sat in the waiting area, watching people come and go, I realized how much this moment meant to me. It wasn't just about proving them wrong. It wasn't even about winning. It was about taking back my life, about showing them and myself that I still had power. And as we were called into the courtroom, I knew that whatever happened next, I was going to walk out of there with my head held high, because I was no longer just the woman they thought they could control. I was a fighter, and I was ready to win. But I couldn't shake the nagging thought. If they were willing to go this far, how far would they go to make sure I lost? The courtroom was colder than I imagined. The walls felt like they were closing in on me as I sat there, waiting for the proceedings to begin. I had prepared myself mentally, reminding myself over and over that I wasn't just fighting for my finances, my house, or my independence. I was fighting for my dignity. I was fighting to prove that I was not the fragile, easily manipulated woman my ex-husband and daughter thought I was. I sat next to Linda, my lawyer, trying to steady my breathing. She was calm, focused, as always, scribbling notes on her legal pad. I envied that about her, her ability to keep her composure in moments like these. The truth was, I was terrified. Terrified not of losing the case, but of losing myself, of losing the sense of control that had, until recently, been the only thing I felt I had left. As the door to the courtroom opened, I felt a chill run through me. John walked in first, followed by Samantha. She looked more put together than I had ever seen her, her hair styled, her face meticulously made up. I noticed, too, how she kept glancing at me with an air of superiority, as if she had already won. She didn't even need to speak. Her presence alone, the confident way she carried herself, was enough. She was the one who had been fed the story, that I was losing my mind, that I couldn't be trusted. And there, sitting in the courtroom, I realized just how far they had gone in their manipulation. They had painted me as the villain, the crazy woman, the one who needed to be taken care of, all to gain control of everything I had worked for. "Your Honor," Linda began. Linda, standing and addressing the judge as she rose from her seat. "We are here today to prove that Marlene Roberts is more than capable of managing her own affairs, and that the accusations against her, made by her daughter and ex-husband, are baseless and unfounded." I felt my chest tighten at the sound of Linda's voice. She was the calm in the storm, but it was my storm, and everything inside me was telling me this would be harder than I thought. I glanced over at Samantha, who avoided my gaze, sitting there with an expression I couldn't quite read. John, on the other hand, sat with his usual arrogance. He was certain of the outcome. They both were. The judge was an older man, his glasses perched low on his nose as he scanned the papers in front of him. He had the air of someone who had seen it all, someone who had heard the same stories, the same accusations 100 times. I could see the skepticism in his eyes as he glanced at me, but I didn't let it shake me. I couldn't. "We'll begin with the petitioner," the judge said, nodding toward John's lawyer, who stood and began to speak. John's lawyer painted a picture of me that felt like a punch in the gut. He spoke of a woman who was no longer fit to make decisions for herself, someone who had become erratic and unpredictable, who couldn't manage her finances or care for herself. He presented examples of things that, in his view, showed my inability to function, how I had made poor decisions in the past, how I had neglected to manage my wealth properly, and how I had become withdrawn, unfit for the responsibilities I once handled with ease. It was all a carefully crafted story, designed to make me seem like someone who was losing her grip on reality. The words stung, even though I knew they were lies. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the familiar feeling of frustration building inside me. But I couldn't let it show. I couldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Then it was my turn. Linda stood and turned to me with a nod. "Marlene," she said softly, her voice reassuring, "you're up." I stood slowly, my legs shaking, but I walked with purpose to the witness stand. The silence in the courtroom felt deafening as I settled into the chair, the weight of everyone's gaze pressing on me. The judge addressed me kindly, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. "Ms. Roberts, can you please explain to the court why you believe the claims made by your ex-husband and daughter are inaccurate?" I took a deep breath, my hands resting on the edge of the witness stand, gripping it as I collected my thoughts. I didn't know where to begin, but I knew I had to start somewhere. This wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I still had control over my own life. "I'm not losing my mind," I said firmly, looking directly at the judge. "I've worked hard my entire life. I've built everything I have, brick by brick, and I've never once asked for anyone's help. Yes, I'm older now. Yes, I may not be able to do things the way I used to, but that doesn't mean I've lost the ability to think for myself or to make decisions. It doesn't mean I'm incapable." I paused, taking in the silence that followed. I could feel the eyes of the courtroom on me, waiting for my next words. "I've raised my daughter on my own. I've dealt with hardship, with disappointment, with betrayal, and through it all, I've always been the one to hold it all together. The truth is, my ex-husband left me. He walked out, and I had to raise Samantha by myself. I never once asked him for help, And now, he wants to take control of my life. And Samantha, she's always been the same. She doesn't understand the responsibility of what it means to take care of yourself. She doesn't understand the consequences of her actions, and she never will until she learns the hard way. There was a long pause, and I saw a flicker of something in the judge's eyes. Maybe doubt, maybe acknowledgement, but I didn't care. I had said what needed to be said. John's lawyer stood and began to cross-examine me. He tried to rattle me, asking questions that I knew were designed to make me seem unstable. "Ms. Roberts," he said smoothly, "can you explain why you chose to sell your house? Why you decided to leave your daughter without any support?" I took a deep breath. "I sold my house because I need to live my life. I'm not going to be trapped in a place that reminds me of everything I've lost. And as for my daughter, she's an adult. It's time she learned how to take responsibility for herself." The lawyer's attempts to break me fell flat. I wasn't backing down. I wasn't the broken woman they thought I was. The rest of the hearing blurred by a mix of legal jargon, accusations, and attempts to twist my words. But I kept my focus. I kept my composure. By the end of the day, after all the back and forth, the judge finally announced that the court would recess until the next morning. As I sat in that cold, sterile courtroom, I knew the fight wasn't over. It was far from over. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had walked into that courtroom as a woman who felt invisible, weak, and broken. But as I stood to leave, I realized something. I was stronger than I had ever been. Whatever happened tomorrow, I had already won. The following day was a blur of anticipation. I could hardly sleep the night before the judge was to make his ruling. The courtroom was filled with the same tense silence I'd felt yesterday, only this time, I was steeling myself for what was to come. John, Samantha, and their lawyer sat on the other side of the room, their cold, calculating eyes watching me. I could feel the weight of their judgment, but it no longer made me shrink. I had spent so many years allowing them to control the narrative, to control how I saw myself. But now, standing here in front of them, I had learned something crucial. I was done being passive. I was done being the victim in this story. And as much as they wanted to tear me down, I was ready to face whatever came next. The judge entered, his heavy footsteps echoing in the silence. He didn't waste time. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the lawyers before turning his gaze toward me. "Marlene Roberts," he said, his voice steady but soft. "After hearing the evidence presented by both sides, I'm going to make my ruling. You've had a long, difficult path, but the court must decide whether you're capable of managing your own affairs or if someone needs to take over that responsibility." I felt my heart beat in my throat. This was it. This was the moment that would decide everything. John's lawyer was the first to speak, standing up with his usual air of authority. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. Ms. Roberts has shown erratic behavior, has made decisions that are clearly beyond her capacity, and continues to put her own well-being at risk. The situation with her daughter is one example, and the sudden decision to sell her home, without any rational explanation, speaks volumes about her instability." I wanted to scream, to argue that they were twisting the truth, but I stayed quiet, my hands gripping the edge of the table as I watched the proceedings unfold. Samantha didn't say a word. She sat there, watching the lawyer speak with a smug look on her face, like she knew the outcome already. I could feel her eyes boring into me. She hadn't said much during the entire case. I was sure she thought she was above it all, that I was already defeated. But I wasn't. The judge listened patiently, then nodded. "I understand the arguments made by both parties, but, Ms. Roberts, I've also heard your side, your testimony about your ability to live independently, to manage your own affairs. The court has a responsibility to protect those who cannot care for themselves, but it also has a duty to respect personal autonomy." My mind raced, my hands sweaty, but I didn't let my nerves show. I had worked so hard to prove to everyone, especially myself, that I could still make decisions for my life. I was in control. I wasn't the woman they thought I was. The judge paused before continuing, his voice growing more measured. "After considering all the evidence, and given your age and your history of managing your financial and personal affairs, I find that there is insufficient proof to declare you unfit to make your own decisions. You will maintain control over your finances, your health, and your life." I felt a rush of relief flood through me, like a dam breaking open. My hands trembled, but I stood up straighter. I had won. The ruling wasn't just a victory in court, it was a victory over everything I had ever been made to believe about myself. It was a triumph over John, over Samantha, over every voice that told me I wasn't good enough, strong enough, or capable enough. John's face fell, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of satisfaction at seeing the arrogance drain from his expression. For once, it wasn't him who held the power, it was me. Samantha, too, looked stunned, but it was the briefest flicker of surprise. She quickly masked it with her usual indifference. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She had probably expected me to cave, to be the passive, weak woman she had always assumed I was. But she was wrong. "We are done here," the judge declared, standing up and signaling the end of the hearing. "Ms. Roberts, the court finds in your favor. Your case is closed." As I gathered my things and left the courtroom, I felt a sense of finality, like a chapter was closing, and for the first time in years, I was in control of the narrative. I wasn't defeated. I had fought back, and I had won. But as I walked out of the courthouse, I knew this victory wouldn't come without consequences. I had made it clear to John and Samantha that I wasn't someone to be controlled. That alone would be enough to stir resentment, and I couldn't be sure what lengths they would go to next. As I got into my car and drove home, I felt a strange calm wash over me. The weight of their expectations, the suffocating grip they had on my life, had finally been broken. But it wasn't just about the court ruling. It was about me, finally taking back control, finally refusing to be manipulated by the people I had once trusted the most. I knew the next few months would be difficult. There would be anger, frustration, and attempts to regain control. But I wasn't afraid. I had already won the most important battle, the one where I reclaimed my own strength. And as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow across the horizon, I couldn't help but feel a sense of freedom that I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer a woman trapped by her past, by her mistakes, by the demands of others. I was free to live my life on my terms, and nothing would take that away from me again. The days following the court ruling were a strange mix of relief and unease. I had won. I had stood my ground, fought for my autonomy, and proven to the court and to myself that I was still capable, still strong, still in control. But with that victory came an undeniable tension, a new layer of uncertainty. Samantha and John weren't the types to just walk away. They didn't give up easily. They had always expected me to be the one who bent, the one who compromised, but that wasn't happening anymore. Samantha barely spoke to me after the hearing. She seemed distant, withdrawn, as though she was biding her time, plotting her next move. I could feel the storm brewing, but I wasn't sure when it would hit. It was a strange thing, living in the same house as someone who was, at one point, your child, yet now felt more like a stranger who had grown cold and distant. Her silence was as loud as any argument, and it gnawed at me in ways I couldn't explain. One evening, as I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea, trying to clear my mind, Samantha came outside. Her footsteps were heavy, deliberate, but she didn't sit down beside me. Instead, she stood by the railing, staring out into the darkening sky. The tension between us was thick, palpable. It felt like there was something unsaid hanging in the air, something I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. "You know," she said quietly, her back to me, "I never thought you'd actually do it. I never thought you'd fight back like this." I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to keep my distance, to ignore the conversation altogether. But this was the moment, wasn't it? The moment when everything could either fall apart or begin to heal. So I took a deep breath and turned toward her. "I had no choice," I said softly. "You and your father made it clear that you thought I was incapable. You thought I couldn't make decisions for myself. And I had to prove to you both that I wasn't losing my mind. I'm still me, Samantha. I'm still capable." She didn't respond for a long moment, and for a brief second, I thought she might walk away again, retreat into the silence she had perfected. But instead, she turned toward me. There was something different in her eyes, something that looked almost vulnerable. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was scared. I was scared that you were slipping away from me, that I was losing you too. I didn't know what else to do." Her words hit me harder than I expected. They weren't an apology. They weren't even an explanation. But they were raw, honest in a way I hadn't heard from her in years. And for the first time in a long while, I realized just how much she had been hurting, how much she had been struggling with the idea that I was aging, that I wasn't the same mother she remembered. I was scared, too, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I was scared that you'd never learn how to take responsibility for your own life, that you'd keep using me, keep thinking you could manipulate me into doing whatever you wanted. But now, I see you. I see your fear, and I see that you're lost. But you have to find your own way. I can't do it for you anymore. For a moment, there was nothing but silence between us, the weight of unspoken truths hanging in the air. And then, to my surprise, she stepped closer to me. Her posture softened, her shoulders no longer tense. She stood there for a long time, just looking at me. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, Mom," she said, her voice shaky. "But maybe I need to start trying." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to reach out, to hold her, to tell her that everything would be okay. But another part of me knew better. I couldn't protect her anymore. She had to learn to navigate life on her own, just as I had done. "I know," I said simply, my voice steady, yet heavy with the realization that everything had changed between us. "But you're going to have to figure it out, on your own." She nodded slowly, a quiet tear slipping down her cheek, though she quickly wiped it away. For the first time in years, I saw my daughter as someone who might one day understand me again. I didn't know when that would happen, or if it ever would. But in that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what had been broken. The next few weeks were quiet. Samantha stayed in her room more, only coming out when necessary. She wasn't the same person she had been before the court hearing. There was a new wariness in her, a distance that wasn't there before. But it wasn't hostility. It was something else, a kind of quiet acceptance that things had changed, that she couldn't just expect me to be the same woman she had manipulated in the past. She had to find her way forward, just like I had done all these years. But it wasn't just Samantha I had to worry about. John, of course, wasn't going to let this go quietly. The lawyer he had hired had sent a few more letters, each one more threatening than the last. He wanted to try to reopen the case, to challenge the ruling. But I wasn't worried anymore. Linda had made it clear that there was no basis for an appeal. The case was closed. I had won. Still, the anxiety lingered in the back of my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. They would keep coming after me, trying to break me, trying to tear me down. But I was ready for it. I had faced their lies, their manipulations, and I had fought back. I had proven to them and to myself that I was stronger than they had ever given me credit for. I wasn't going to let them take away my life, and I wasn't going to let them take away my peace. For the first time in years, I could see a future ahead of me, a future where I was in control, and no one, not John, not Samantha, was going to take that from me again. As I sat on the porch, watching the sunset with a quiet sense of resolve, I realized something. The victory wasn't just in the court ruling. The victory was in the woman I had become, the woman who had finally found her voice, the woman who was no longer afraid to stand up for herself. And for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. Days turned into weeks, and though the immediate legal battle was behind me, the storm was far from over. Samantha and John hadn't given up entirely, even if their efforts had waned for the time being. I knew them too well. They would find a way to regain control. It was only a matter of time. But for now, there was peace. A tentative peace, but peace nonetheless. Samantha, to my surprise, began to make small efforts to take responsibility for herself. She found a part-time job at a local bookstore. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I didn't comment on it, didn't congratulate her. She had to know deep down that this was the beginning of something much bigger than her. She had to learn to stand on her own, just as I had learned to stand on my own after John had left. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, going through some old letters I had put off reading for years, I heard her footsteps approach. She stood in the doorway, her eyes hesitant, but no longer filled with the usual arrogance. "I got a shift this weekend," she said quietly, her hands nervously twisting the hem of her sweater. "It's not much, but it's a start, right?" I looked up from the letter in front of me, meeting her gaze. Her face, which had once been so closed off and defensive, was softer now, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. "It's a start," I said simply, not wanting to overstep or push her too hard. This wasn't something I could fix for her, no matter how much I wanted to. She nodded, then hesitated before taking a step closer. "Mom, I just want you to know that I didn't mean for things to get this bad. I didn't know how to handle it, and I thought I was helping, but I wasn't." Her words hit me like a wave, surprising me in their honesty. For so long, I had been the one apologizing, the one bending over backwards to make things right, to smooth over the cracks in our relationship. But hearing her admit she had been wrong, that she was willing to acknowledge the harm she had caused, was a moment I hadn't expected. "I know, Samantha," I said, my voice low but steady. "I know, and it's okay. But you have to start taking responsibility for yourself now. That's all I've ever wanted for you." She nodded again, swallowing hard. "I'm trying, Mom. I really am. I didn't know what the future would look like for us. I didn't know if things would ever go back to how they were, or if they even could. But in that moment, there was a shift, a new understanding between us, a kind of unspoken acknowledgement that we both had work to do. But at least now, she was trying, and that was more than I had ever expected from her. The next few weeks felt like a slow unraveling of old tensions. Samantha kept her distance, but in a less confrontational way. She focused on her job, spent more time away from the house, and I could see her slowly starting to change. It wasn't a dramatic shift. It wasn't an overnight transformation. But there were moments, small moments, where I saw glimpses of the person she could become. And that gave me hope. John, on the other hand, had completely retreated after the court ruling. He didn't try to contact me directly, and his lawyer stopped sending threatening letters. It was as if the weight of the legal battle had finally crushed his resolve. I would have liked to think that he was done trying to control me, that he had accepted the outcome. But I knew him too well. He never let go so easily. One afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from John's lawyer. "I just wanted to inform you that Mr. Roberts is considering selling his share of the house you once owned together," the lawyer said, his voice polite, detached. "He's legally entitled to half the property's value, and he intends to pursue it." The news hit me like a gut punch. I had already fought for so much, my independence, my dignity, my control over my life. And now it seemed John wanted to take something else from me. The house, the one place that had been mine, that I had poured everything into. It wasn't about the money, not entirely. It was about the principle. It was about John's need to remind me that he could still take something from me. I paused for a long moment, taking in the news. It would be a legal battle, no doubt. A lengthy one. He knew I couldn't afford to drag this through court again. I could feel the old familiar anxiety creeping in, but I quickly pushed it aside. I had fought this fight before, and I could do it again. "No," I said firmly. "Tell Mr. Roberts that I have no intention of selling the house. If he wants his share, he can take it to court, but I won't be bullied into giving it up." The lawyer sighed, clearly disappointed. "Very well. I'll inform him of your decision." I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a moment, my fingers clenched tightly around the receiver. I wasn't surprised by John's latest move. It was exactly what I had expected. He wasn't done yet. He wasn't going to let me have the final say. But the truth was, I wasn't backing down. I had fought for my freedom, my life, and now I would fight for the home I had built for myself. I wasn't going to let him take that from me too. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, legal consultations, and more letters from John's lawyer. It felt like I was back in the thick of it again, fighting for my right to live my life as I saw fit. But this time, it was different. This time, I was ready. I had already survived the worst of it. I had already taken back control of my life. The house, though it held memories of a painful past, was mine now, and I would defend it with everything I had. But even as I prepared for the next round of this battle, I couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of pride. I had come this far. I had survived, and I would continue to survive, no matter what John or anyone else threw at me. As I looked out the window, watching the sun set on the horizon, I realized something. This wasn't just a fight for a house, or for my finances, or for my future. It was a fight for my peace of mind, and I was ready to win. Whatever came next, I would face it head on, because I had already proven something far more important than anything else. I was in control of my own life, and that was worth everything. The fight over the house wasn't something I had anticipated after the court ruling. It felt like everything I had worked for, the peace, the quiet, the stability I had fought to reclaim, was slowly slipping through my fingers. John had made it clear that he wasn't ready to walk away just yet. And this time, it wasn't just about him or Samantha trying to manipulate me. This was about his greed, his desire to always have control over something, no matter what it took. I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to sell. I couldn't, not after everything I had gone through. This house, this place, was my last piece of independence. It wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of everything I had fought for. But as the days passed, and John's lawyer sent one letter after another, I began to feel the pressure mounting. I had to respond. I had to fight back, or I would lose everything I had worked so hard to rebuild. I didn't know how long I could go on like this. The legal costs were eating away at me, and the constant barrage of letters and threats was wearing me down. I had been through this before, but this time felt different. This time, it wasn't just about me. It was about my future, my peace, and the life I wanted to lead. I had spent too many years being dragged through the mud by people who couldn't understand that I was capable of making my own decisions. Samantha remained quiet, as she had for weeks. She still hadn't fully come to terms with the changes between us. I could see the weight of the situation on her, but she didn't know how to handle it. She had always been the one in the background, the one who relied on me, who manipulated the situation to fit her needs. Now, she had to face the consequences of her actions. One afternoon, after a particularly stressful phone call with my lawyer, I found myself standing on the porch again, staring out at the garden. The peacefulness of it seemed so distant, almost surreal in the midst of everything happening. I had spent so many years trying to protect my daughter, trying to make things right for her, for us. But I was beginning to realize that the life I had wanted for her, the one I had dreamed of, was slipping away. I couldn't protect her anymore. She had to learn to stand on her own. I wasn't prepared for the knock on the door that evening. When I opened it, I found Samantha standing there, her face puffy from crying. For a moment, I felt a pang of concern, but then she spoke, and her words caught me off guard. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been an idiot. I've hurt you, and I didn't even realize it." I didn't know what to say. I had spent so many years trying to reach her, trying to make her see the consequences of her choices, but it had never gotten through. And now, here she was, finally admitting she was wrong. "I've been selfish," she continued, her eyes wet with unshed tears. "I've been so caught up in my own issues, in my own fear of losing you, that I didn't even stop to think about what you've been through. I didn't see that you were just trying to protect me, trying to do what was best for me. And I'm sorry for all the times I made you feel like you didn't matter. You do matter. You matter more than anything." I didn't know how to respond. I had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, I wasn't sure if I could let go of the anger, the hurt, the years of frustration. But there was something in her eyes, something in the way she spoke, that made me believe she was finally starting to understand. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she added, wiping her eyes, "but I want to try. I want to fix things. I want to be the daughter you deserve." There was a silence between us, the weight of everything we had been through hanging in the air. But for the first time in years, I felt like there was a possibility of healing. Maybe it wouldn't be easy, maybe it wouldn't happen overnight, but this was the start of something new. "I don't know if I can just forget everything, Samantha," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "But I'm willing to try. We'll take it one step at a time." She nodded, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a glimmer of the person I had always hoped she would be. Not perfect, not without faults, but someone who could learn, who could grow. The next few weeks were quieter. Samantha began working harder at her job, showing up on time, taking more responsibility. It wasn't easy for her. She stumbled, she made mistakes, but each time she got up, tried again, and took another step forward. I saw the change, even if it was slow. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Meanwhile, John continued his attempts to force me into selling the house. Each letter from his lawyer felt like another blow, another attempt to break my resolve, but I didn't let it shake me. I wasn't going to give up. Not this time. I knew that I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the years of mistakes and regrets that had led us here. But I also knew that I had control over my future. And if that meant standing firm against John, against Samantha, against anyone who tried to take my peace away, then I would do it. One day, as I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, I picked up the latest letter from John's lawyer. I had already prepared myself for this moment. I wasn't going to back down. I folded the letter, set it aside, and turned my attention to the window, watching the sunlight filter through the trees in the garden. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. I had fought for everything I had. I had fought for my life, my dignity, and my freedom. And I wasn't about to let anyone take that from me. Not now, not ever. As the days went by, I felt the weight of the past slowly lifting. I had my daughter back, in a way. I had my life back, and I was no longer afraid of the future. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. Because this time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living, and nothing, no one, could take that away from me. The sun was beginning to set as I sat in the living room, my gaze lingering on the familiar walls of the house. It had been months since the court battle, months since everything had changed, and yet it felt like time had stopped. The house was quiet, more peaceful than it had ever been. The constant tension that once hung in the air had dissipated, replaced by an almost gentle silence, a silence that I had fought so hard to create, a silence that was mine to hold. Samantha had come a long way in such a short time. Her transformation wasn't drastic. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. She was working now, saving up for her own place, and for the first time in a long time, I could see a future for her. She was growing, learning to be independent in a way I had once hoped for. It wasn't easy, but it was progress. She wasn't the same girl I had spent years trying to protect, and maybe that was okay. She had to find her own way, just as I had done. I couldn't carry her anymore. The peace we had now wasn't perfect. There were still awkward silences, lingering resentment in the air every now and then. But there was a mutual understanding, an acceptance that things had changed. Samantha no longer viewed me as an obstacle or someone to be manipulated. We didn't have the perfect relationship, but we were working toward it. John, however, was a different story. Though he had stepped back from his legal pursuits for the time being, I knew better than to believe he was truly done. He hadn't given up on trying to get me to sell the house, to sell my life, but I had already proven to him, and to myself, that I was no longer the same woman I had been when he left. He had no control over me anymore. I had fought for my right to live independently, and I wasn't going to let him take that from me. Not now, not ever. I stood from the couch and walked over to the window, staring out at the garden. It was a small, quiet place, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of gratitude for it. The flowers I had planted with my own hands, the trees that had grown taller with each passing year, it was all mine, a testament to the life I had built, a life that I had fought for, against all odds. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I turned, hesitant at first, but then I recognized the familiar face standing in the doorway. It was Samantha. She was holding a small box in her hands, looking a little nervous. "Mom, can I come in?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. She hesitated for a moment before entering, her eyes glancing around the room. There was a brief silence before she spoke again, the box still clutched in her hands. I found something," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "It's from when I was little. I thought you might want to see it." I looked at her curiously, as she placed the box gently on the coffee table. The moment she opened it, a wave of memories flooded my mind. Inside, there were old photographs, pictures of Samantha and me from when she was a child, from a time before the pain, before the distance between us grew. There was one of us at the beach, her smile wide as she held up a seashell she had found. Another of her sitting on my lap, both of us laughing. They were moments I had long forgotten, moments before everything became so complicated. I swallowed hard, feeling a lump in my throat. For a second, I couldn't find the words. Seeing these pictures, these glimpses of the mother and daughter we once were, stirred something deep within me. I had been so focused on the hurt, the betrayal, that I had forgotten the good, the love we had shared. "I remember this," I said quietly, picking up the photo of us at the beach. "You were so happy. We were so happy." Samantha nodded, her eyes softening. "I know. I remember it too, Mom. I miss that. I miss us." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of everything we had been through, but also filled with the potential of what we could still become. I could see the sincerity in her eyes. She was trying, really trying. And for the first time in so long, I felt a sense of hope that we could rebuild, even if it meant starting from scratch. I miss that too, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. But we can still have something. We can still find a way back. She sat down beside me on the couch, and for the first time in a long time, we were just mother and daughter again. We didn't have all the answers. We didn't have the perfect relationship, but we had each other, and that was enough for me. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable this time. It was peaceful. As we sat together, looking at the old photographs, I realized that I had something I hadn't had in years: peace. I had fought for it, and I had won. The future was still uncertain. There would be challenges ahead, and the road wouldn't always be easy. But I had proven to myself, to John, and to Samantha, that I was strong, that I was capable, that I was the one in control of my life, and whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. With my daughter by my side, we were no longer just mother and daughter. We were two women who had learned to stand on our own, who had been through hell and come out stronger. Together, we would build a new future, one step at a time. And as the sun set on another day, I knew that the worst was behind me. The battle was over, and now, finally, I could rest, because I had won. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.